Okay, so starting in 3, 2, 1.
Bore da pawb, croeso gynnes iawn i Bwrdd Addysg a Gwella Iechyd Cymru heddiw. Good morning everybody and welcome to Health Education Improvement Wales Open Board meeting. Before I start, I'm going to hand over to Rob Heritage, one of our IT guys, to explain about translation.
Bwrdd, good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. If you have joined via the Zoom client and you have the latest version of the software installed, you'll have an interpretation button at the bottom of the screen. When the Welsh speaking segments start, if you click on the icon and select the English channel, you'll hear the translator. Please be aware that during those translation sessions, there may be some delays between the Welsh translation stopping and you then being able to hear the English again. If you find that the sound on English speaking or the main audio of the session is too quiet, if you switch back to the off channel, you'll be able to hear the meeting audio fully again. So you have the ability to switch backwards and forwards between hearing the translator or not at your will. Hopefully, we're hoping the session is going to go really well today. Thanks to everybody for their participation.
Thank you, Rob, for that erudite explanation of the technicalities. Right, now gawn dechrau, let's start. Apologies for absence, I have received none. I have received no notification of new declarations of interest. Can I just check that there are no interests to be declared that are not already declared and that are pertinent to today's meeting? No, I can see no interest declared. Thank you so much. We're now going to move into the unconfirmed minutes of the board that was held on the 26th of November. I want to go through, first of all, for accuracy. So bear with me, page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Can you verbally say yes if you're content with the accuracy, please?
Yes.
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 Thank you very much. I'd now like to move to the action log, agenda item 1.5. And I just 1.5 complete, 1.6 complete, 1.7. Under 1.7, the terms for holding virtual meetings of the board and committees was extended to March 2021. Clearly, we are looking at probably having to extend further, depending on the lockdown status. We've also suspended the board report.
The briefing in respect of the board.
Yeah, we've also suspended the briefing in respect of the board because we've made our board meetings open to the public. That was an action that I took, and I'd like the board to confirm that action, please.
Yes.
You okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much. 2.2, that's complete. 4.2 is on today's agenda, and 4.4 again. That's complete, David?
Sorry, could you repeat that? That's number 4.
4.4 board assurance framework.
Yes, that's going into the next schedule for the next meeting of the audit committee.
Okay, thank you. So if we go back to the minutes now, please. And now I want to go for matters arising that haven't been covered by the action log. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6. Please stop me if there's any issues. Page 7, page 8, 9, 10, and 11. Are you content with the board papers, with the board minutes?
Content?
Yes, thank you.
Can you verbalise that, please, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Right. We now go to agenda item 2.1, the Chair's report. Now, I do hope you'll forgive me for quite a dark opening to my Chair's report. I think this pandemic has moved from being what was seen as a challenging time in the earlier part of 2020 to a much more challenging and enduring and impactful set of circumstances. It all feels very personal to everyone. The other thing I'd like to draw attention to is that whilst our organisation has focused on supporting the NHS and social care to deal with elements of challenge from the pandemic itself, our purpose, our raison d'etre, is to ensure education and training and a pipeline into the workforce. And it's really important to underline here and now that that work is continuing and must continue with focus and energy. And I'm very grateful for the tremendous efforts to support the students and trainees that's going on and to protect their training as much as we can. This has involved a whole load of complex rearrangements and establishing different sorts of ways of working and methodologies of training. It's also very much about ensuring their well-being. And I'd like to thank the organisations, our health boards, trusts, our universities, our regulators, and the Royal Colleges for the positive way that we're all working together to make sure that as we come through this pandemic, we have a sustainable workforce and that we are able to meet the challenges that will come during the different phases. I have to say that as we reach these horrific numbers in terms of deaths, and I think none of us have witnessed anything like this in our professional careers, we do need to realise that these are very personal numbers, that these are people with families, friends, and I'm sure this is something that is really impacting on the frontline staff who are dealing with this every day. On a more hopeful and positive note has been the work to get off the sticks in setting up the vaccination programs. And it is through this vaccination program that we see the small beams of light in order to get through. Of course, there's some caution around mutations, and the governments have taken decisive action in closing the borders and travel within and out of the UK. I think it's really important to understand that this pandemic is, as its name suggests, a pandemic. It's affecting all parts of the world in different ways. And our hearts must go out to Brazil, to Manaus, who are in a particularly difficult situation. The The ministerial meetings with the chairs and chief execs continue. And of course, the efforts that have been made to support the vaccination programme, and Julie, our deputy chief exec, has been playing a major role in overseeing and ensuring that programme and supporting the government. I have to say that expectations are high, and it's really fantastic to see the joy on people's faces when they have had their vaccination. And those of us who are waiting for it, we have to be patient. We have to be patient, but we also have to understand how our behaviours really can affect the spread of this disease. It's been a regular set of meetings that I've been holding with execs, with the deans, and with partner organisations. And I can see that our role in supporting the well-being, particularly the mental well-being of people, is really important, as is our role in developing the leadership. And there are some fantastic signs of wonderful forms of leadership that we're witnessing. And one particular area that I have a keen interest in is urgent care. And I work on I'm supporting the 111 board. I've been asked to chair a group to look at integrated governance as more new services are created. And that's, I find, very interesting. And I think they really will help transform services. John and I both have an interest in the NHS Confederation Reset sessions. And yesterday, there was an excellent session on the socio-economic duty. And never before has that been more important. It comes into being this year, and I'm sure that it's going to be something that we as an organisation can demonstrate how we can play our part. Finally, the Minister has announced, the ministers have announced a consultation on the future of social care. The chairs and vice chairs and chief execs have been involved in that debate through the NHS Confederation. And I look forward to our response to that consultation. I think the future of health and social care is, through our workforce strategy, is something that will bear fruit. And clearly, we can improve on where we have been. John's work with the vice chairs has also focused on mental health and on well-being, and also on children's mental health. John, I don't know whether you want to say anything from your point of view.
No, I think not. What the report is fairly clear, and you're right, Chris, that the vice chairs, who have a particular responsibility for mental health and primary care, when we've met, we have focused on those issues particularly. And when we met with the new Minister for Mental Health, she's been very keen to discuss with us children's services and mental health services, as you said. And she has been asking us for reports regularly on how those services are coping with the pandemic and how we're managing to maintain services to particularly young people. So she's taking a keen interest, and it's a very stimulating and helpful discussion, I think. But no, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, John. So just to finish, I want to just comment on our staff. I joined a staff event earlier this week, and it's in the report, but the subjects covered are really interesting, pertinent, and important for the way we are working. was really interesting to hear the debate on the carbon footprint. I want to say that I am impressed by the energy and commitment and the continuing striving for improving things that's occurring within the organisation. And Alex, you should be very proud of the way that the organisation is working at this time, even in these very difficult times where it's virtually virtual. So on that note, I'll finish. I'm happy to answer any questions on my report, but there it is. Tina?
Yeah, thanks for the report. I just wondered, with regards to the staff event, I know it was on Monday, whether some of the agenda items that you found useful could be shared with board, or is going forward, is it something that we could periodically attend as well?
Yeah, I will pick that up. With independent members, I know have attended staff events since the inception of HEIW, and I will pick that up and reintroduce and seek to reintroduce that. And yes, I think there were some very interesting comments, and perhaps Alex or Julie can pick that up by sending a briefing out. Alex?
Yeah, sorry, just to say I did pick this up with the chairman yesterday, Tina. I noticed that for some reason independent members hadn't been invited to this one, and we have invited you to all of the ones in the past, so that's our mistake, so I do apologise, and we will make sure that you're re-invited to future events. But yeah, we can certainly do a summary of what we were discussing, and we can pick some of those issues up on the agenda today as well, so I'm really sorry about that.
Ruth?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say how much I agreed with your comments about the depth and the seriousness of the situation that COVID has now arrived at and the impacts. But one of the things that's come out of the reports you kindly circulated from PHW, Public Health Wales, and also from wider publications, is the impact is having a disproportionate impact of their disproportionate impact on disadvantaged, and also from those people who are in migrant or refugee situations. And I think we've got to bear that in mind, the inequalities aspects of this in relation to our students and our teaching and education responsibilities. I think that story is becoming very clear. It's one that we were aware of at the beginning. I think we do need to watch it. So it's to agree with you and say that I just think that that's an aspect that has emerged particularly.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. I shared with you reports that I've been sent by Public Health Wales, and I think there are two aspects. One was about inequalities and the impact of COVID on individuals and populations that have health inequalities, but also the impact this is going to have on education going forward. And that is something, as an organisation, we will be witnessing and we'll have to work with in order to ensure that we allow people from lesser opportunities. It's interesting also to note that the Black and ethnic minority communities, there's some worry about the uptake of vaccines for all sorts of reasons. So this differentiation, and I know there's an agenda item later on differential attainment. This is an important debate, and it's important we don't close our eyes to it. We have to work together to enable equity and equality. So are you content that we finished this conversation about my report? Yeah. So I'll now move on to agenda item 2.2. Alex, Chief Exec's report.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully the report is self-explanatory, and I'm happy to take questions on any elements of it. The two things just to draw attention to are, firstly, obviously the COVID situation and the impact on the education and training that we deliver and commission. And we shared a briefing with board members last week on where we're at with some of those issues. And we've got a very comprehensive risk log, which is really drilling down by profession, by programme, by specialty in some instances, where the risks are and how we're managing those. And hopefully the Education Committee will have a bit more time to spend looking at this when it meets on February the 9th. And possibly going back to the Chairman's comments about the wider implications on education, could give some advice and provide some discussion on what the impact of that might be that we need to start thinking about going forward. So I'm not going to dwell too much on that today, other than to say clearly that is the biggest challenge for us as an organisation at the moment. The other area that we're spending a lot of time on, and we spent quite a lot of time on this at the staff conference on Monday, was around the annual plan, which is on the agenda today. So because we hadn't had a staff event since we've started to develop the annual plan, we needed to bring people up to speed with where we'd got to, as we shared with the board before Christmas, the strategic objectives in the plan, and to really get a sense from people about where they see themselves within those strategic objectives, whether that feels right, and really make sure that everybody has got that sort of overview of what's going on in the organisation. And again, we used Mentimeter to great effect, which is always, I think, a really good tool to enable everybody to have a voice, no matter what their position in the organisation. Everybody has an equal chance to contribute to that. And so we've got some really rich feedback on the annual plan. And we took some elements of the annual plan in a bit more detail. So again, something which there's a real danger that COVID crowds out is the environmental agenda and biodiversity. And that is something which is in its infancy really in our organisation, but we had the chance to talk to staff about, because in the midst of all of this pandemic crisis, there's another crisis happening, as we all know, and we need to make sure we're doing our bit to support the climate change emergency as well. So the annual plan will obviously continue to be quite a big piece of our work over the next couple of months. I think for us, that's less impacted on by COVID than some of the other organisations, which gives us an advantage really in being clearer about our plans and ambitions for next year, and therefore having a better chance of getting on the front foot with that. So we will take that chance as we've got it, because really I think for us, those longer term issues, those medium term issues, people are relying on us to deliver those things, and it's really important that we keep our eye on that ball whilst everybody else is struggling with some of the day-to-day pressures of COVID, and that's certainly our intention. So that's all I'm going to say today, Chair, but I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions for Alex from board? John?
Thanks, Alex. In terms of the coronavirus, you remember in the first and second lockdowns, we as HEIW were able to help frontline staff considerably through training and other ways. Where are we now with the support we're giving to frontline staff? Where are the main areas that we're able to impact on the virus, do you think?
Well, obviously we're continuing to provide a lot of support in terms of health and well-being. And so again, we've had a conversation at a board development session around the pyramid that we've got, that Claire Smith's obviously been pivotal in developing. And a key part of that, key challenge in that really is communication and awareness, and really making sure that there is that coordination, because a lot of people are trying to do a lot of things in that space. And there is the danger that staff are overwhelmed and don't really know where to turn. So Claire is doing a lot of work. I know she's been to the vice chairs, John. I've got her to get involved in the Mental Health Network board at their next meeting as well. She's been to the chairs. So we're really trying to make sure that we're promoting all of that work. So there is that clear signposting to those resources, because they will become increasingly important as the pandemic continues. In terms of some of the targeted training that we were doing, there's been less of a need for that this time round, because a lot of that was done in the first wave, but we are refreshing some of that and adding to that where needed. So particularly around critical care skills, for example, also infection prevention and control. And we're supporting on service areas like the rehabilitation agenda. Obviously, Julie's really active in the vaccination programme board. And although we're not providing that training, you know, we've had quite an important role in holding the ring on a number of those all Wales issues and policy issues, and really fixing things that need to be fixed in order to let those workforce models be developed. And then obviously, a lot of communication and support around clinical placements, around redeployment of trainees, making sure that you know, we're not blocking those, but that we're supporting them in the right way to make sure that people are progressing through their training and development. So that's probably a flavour off the top of my head, and other colleagues will come in and identify if I've missed any glaring areas. But it's been probably less of a focus for us this time round than the first time round, because I think that a lot of those plans were already in place, really. So Push is going to come in and help on this issue as well.
Push.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, I was just going to focus on the, I mentioned it in the chat box, but I was just going to focus on the redeployment of medical trainees where needed. That's being done with our input and with our agreement, and we're really heavily involved with making sure that that those decisions for redeployment are reviewed very quickly, so that someone isn't moved into a place where they're under excessive pressure and stress for long periods. The other thing is the current cohort of trainees who are due to rotate in February, we are going ahead with the February rotation because they've been under a lot of pressure up until the end of January, and many of them were looking forward to moving to a different role. So in a way, it's spreading the pressure across more individuals rather than focusing on the same ones. And also, appraisal has been allowed. It's not been suspended, but it's been changed so that this can continue to be an approved missed appraisal for doctors up until the end of March, when the decision will be reviewed, which means some of our GP appraisers got fallow sessions, which they can use in the clinical service as well. So a number of things going on from the medical side. And I know that foundation dentists and some pre-registration pharmacists and pharmacy technicians have also been adjusting their roles depending on the service need.
Angela, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I just made a note in the about remote clinical decision making. So as we know, in the pandemic, across all phases, the need to ensure that we can support the health of people, but not necessarily initially in a direct face-to-face way, has increased reliance on technology, and the need for, we have a role in supporting across Wales remote clinical decision making across all services, from Welsh ambulance, primary care, and in other arenas as well. So again, another area that we are working actively on with our partners.
Okay, thank you, Angela. Are there any other questions relating to Alex's report? Okay, thank you, Alex. We now go on to agenda item 3.1, the annual plan. And I believe, Nicola, you are leading on this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Alex.
Before you start, can I just say, what a truly magnum opus. Right? The paper is amazing.
Thank you, Chair. Alex has talked a little bit about the annual plan in her report, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But we've put the first draft before you today for comments and feedback. And as you know, we've shaped this with the board and with our staff over the last few months based on the approval IMTP that the organisation already had. The next steps are outlined in the paper, which are around developing in more detail our deliverables and actions underneath the strategic objectives, understanding our measures of success and the resources that we need to deliver the plan. And as you know, we've been talking, and we talked in the board development session around our capacity to deliver the plan as a still growing organisation. That's in the context of the national financial context, and I'll ask Avion to comment on that in a minute. So we will be talking to the board, all of us together at the end of February in the board development session on the plan in the round and in more detail around any prioritisation or choices that we may need to make in the context of the resources required and the financial environment at the time. It may be that that won't be a huge issue for us, in which case obviously we'll talk about it in that light, or it may be that we will need to make some choices around where our priorities lie. So I think it's important that we have that conversation at the end of February. In the meantime, now the plan is in the public domain in the board papers. We are going to be sharing it widely across the system for comment, and we have shared it informally with Welsh Government for feedback, and we're expecting an informal meeting with them in February and to have a further conversation with them on it. So happy to take any comments, but first of all, I'll ask Avion to comment on the financial elements of the plan.
Thank you, Nicola. If I can say, in terms of from a financial plan perspective, the financial plan that we're proposing for next year, for the next year and onwards, is primarily based on the education and commissioning plan that was approved by the Minister for 21-22. That is the bulk of the resources that we will include within the plan. But in addition to the resources required for the Education Commission plan, there are resources that we need in order to take the objectives and the actions that we are setting out in the plan forward as well. And so we'll develop a financial plan that encompasses both the Education and Commissioning and the additional resources that we need for our objectives and actions in the plan. We've commenced our discussions with the Welsh Government on those resources. They have commenced, and we're some way through them, and there are some more discussions ahead of us before we can get to an agreed position. What I would say to colleagues is that I do feel for the Welsh Government in terms of the challenges that they have in terms of managing and identifying the resources required by NHS Wales as a whole for the year ahead, because it is so heavily dependent on the impact of the pandemic in 21-22 and the longevity of that impact and the recovery that would be needed for services in light of the pandemic that's actually been abroad. So therefore, our discussions with Welsh Government are particularly challenging because they usually would have issued fixed allocations to health boards before now, and health boards would be expected to actually complete their plans within those allocations. But clearly it's quite difficult for health boards to do that, and therefore there is a challenge for Welsh Government in getting the full picture for NHS Wales next year. And it's in that context that we will be having quite challenging discussions with Welsh Government on the resources that we need in HEIW. So it's underway. We're taking the discussions forward, and I would expect that by the next time that we meet, I will have something more formal to actually present to you in terms of our outcome.
Okay, So, is there anything else you want to add, Nicola?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, so can I ask if there are any board members who have got any comments or questions? Kerry?
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Nicola and colleagues, for the paper. I agree. I think it's quite something to put this together. I suppose my question is directed at Eifion more. In managing HEIW finances, you have been Father Christmas to Welsh Government in many senses. And I think I've raised it before, Eifion, but what sort of assurance are Welsh Government giving HEIW that the returned monies will not be taken off their baseline allocation? The plan is impressive, the plan is ambitious, it is aligned with the workforce strategy, but it would be a shame if in subsequent years we are struggling because of lack of resources. And I think that's going to intensify, because one of the outcomes of COVID in not perhaps 21, 22, but in subsequent years is going to be major constraints on public finance. And that is going to filter through to Wales and to the health service. So what sort of assurance have you had, please?
Okay, thank you for that, Kerry. If I can answer, Chair. It is worth bearing in mind that as I said, the bulk of the resources for HEIW are set out within the Education and Commissioning Plan, which is prepared every summer and submitted every summer. And that is discussed within Welsh Government and approved by the Minister to actually take forward. And for the 21-22 financial year, the Education and Commissioning Plan that we submitted last summer has been approved, along with the resources that would be needed to actually take that forward. So the bulk of our commissioning programme has already been agreed. What we're now talking about is the wrap around those resources, which are the other objectives that we have as HEIW to take our agenda forward. So our discussions with Welsh Government are on the additional stuff that HEIW want to do over and above the Education and Commissioning Plan commissioning numbers. So that's the task that we have. And the fact is that that figure for HEIW is growing every year. You'll remember about 2 years ago when I joined HEIW, we had an allocation that was somewhere around 214 million, 215 million. The allocation that we are in discussion with Welsh Government on for next year is at the level of about 277 million. You can actually see the growth in that resource because of the growth in the numbers of our commissioning programme. The money that we're returning to Welsh Government is where, in taking forward that Education and Commissioning Plan numbers, either our student or training numbers are slightly below the targets that we set ourselves, or there are variations in the numbers of students that decide to be self-funding rather than take the bursary. So the money that we're handing back is at the margins of that allocation. In terms of the discussion for the resources that's left to agree with Welsh Government, which, as I said, is the additional resources to the Education and Commissioning Plan, I haven't had any assurances yet, but that's what the negotiations are about. That's the discussions that I'm having with Welsh Governments about, is about setting those funding levels to take forward what would be practically further new initiatives for HEIW over and above the initiatives that we're currently undertaking. So it's about getting the resources to expand our agenda and take our expanded agenda forward. We're still in the middle of the discussions, so in a sense, I can't give any assurances that we are going to get there, but that would be my aim, so that we get the resources that's needed to take this plan for HEIW forward.
Thank you, Eifion. Can I go to Jill next? Jill, you're on mute. Still can't hear you. Okay, I'll just move on to Tina until we sort out the technical problem. Robert, can we help Jill sort out that problem, please? Yep. Tina?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear, thank you.
Thanks, because I think the annual plan is far-reaching, and I was going to ask the question Kerry asked as well, but I had a second question in relation to the pestle analysis, which is 3.2. I just wondered whether or not we should be including the fact that we're moving into enhanced digitalisation, the GDPR legislation. We haven't commented on it at all, and yet we deal a lot with staffing records, and I think strategically we should be mindful of the organisation and where we sit within the GDPR requirements. That's general data protection. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Jill, can we have another go?
I've taken my headphones off. Does that work?
Oh, yes.
Okay, sorry, I'll put them back on again in a minute. I think I need to press a button somewhere. Yeah, Kerry picked up my first question. So I've just got a couple, if I could just run through. It's a great plan, really ambitious, really pleased to see it. And thanks, Nicola, a lot of hard work's gone into that. One of the questions that I've asked previously, I think, is, and you do refer to it in there, is it's the timescales and sharing our plan and the alignment with others, and how well we feel we're able to do that as we move into our sort of third year, I guess, or second year of a real plan, in terms of making sure that what we say we're going to do is very much reflected in right across the NHS with our partners. And I'm just still mildly concerned about the timescales and only having an informal meeting in February and making sure that we've got these plans all signed, sealed and delivered to run before the start of the year. So I think most of you know I've got to be in my bonnet about that. Second question is really on the health and social care piece, which is where we talk about the health and social care strategy. We don't actually refer to what's happening in the social care piece. And I know this is our plan, but I just feel that it's left hanging. So we say all the things that we're going to do, but not the corresponding things, which I think would add to it and make it feel more of a partnership. Then just a couple of minor things. There's a typo on page 9 in the diagram, and the structured assessment at 1.5 probably needs a bit of explanation for the reader. It just comes from nowhere, and people may not know what a structured assessment is. We all do, but it doesn't actually refer to the fact that it's an external audit assessment of the organisation. And I think that was it. I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Jill. I'll just point out something I forgot to say at the beginning. I wanted to welcome Visha Perez from Wales Audit Office and also Ken from Internal Audit. They are here, so I'm sure they'll be pleased that you've mentioned them in dispatches. Alex, do you want to come back? Your hand is up.
Yeah, I know, but John was first.
Oh, you've got a question. I thought you were going to answer something there. So, John, I'll take your question, then we'll feed back on these comments.
Yeah, mine's a different point. That's okay, is it?
Yeah.
I agree with my colleagues. I think it's an excellent plan and it reflects our strategic objectives. My specific comment is about children and young people's mental health services. We discussed that earlier, and it is a major priority in Wales. And on page 47, I think it is, 48 of the pack, which deals with health professional education, we set out the plans for expanding the numbers of health professionals, doctors and others. And I suppose this question is for Angela and Push. Can we be reassured that in those plans to expand those numbers, CAMHS professionals, children, mental health, young people professionals are reflected in there? I couldn't see any specific mention of CAMHS professionals, but they probably are there. But I just wonder if you could help me with that.
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm happy to respond, and Push may wish to come in as well. Within the preparation of mental health nursing, opportunities for students to undertake placements in CAMHS areas and pursue a career with children and adolescent mental health is a well-established format. In addition to that, registrants can undertake further education through the finances that we get for continuing professional development to undertake additional learning to improve their knowledge and skills in relation to that. But CAMHS professionals are really one of a suite of resources that need to be made available, and in some cases are available to children and young people, and is something that we are looking at within our overall work on mental health that we mentioned earlier. So I hope that does provide some assurance, and is really an area that we recognise and are seeking actively to respond to. So thank you for your question. Thank you. I don't know, Push, if you want to add anything.
Certainly. I think that mental health services for the younger age groups is similar to mental health services more widely. It's always a difficult area for recruitment across the whole of the UK. And we are no different in Wales. So we have always provided incentives for trainees to get into the mental health training schemes, and it's been successful to a degree. And some of them do go into CAMHS, but it is an ongoing issue for us and across the whole of the UK about recruiting doctors into this field. But it's not something we lie still on, but it is something that is an issue.
I noticed, Push, that in the list of training posts, there isn't a specific one for a CAMHS. That's because there aren't those posts, is it? Or?
No, it's a bit like when somebody says, why aren't we recruiting more orthogeriatricians? Because the specialty itself specifically doesn't exist. And this is similar to that. It's a branch of psychiatry, which any psychiatrist can specialize in. So whilst we don't, whilst that sort of post doesn't specifically exist, we do encourage people to go into psychiatry with the hope that they will, specialize in this area. And that's I think is in a way something for us to work with the service on, is to make those type of posts more attractive.
Thank you both. Thank you.
My great worry is that as we go through this COVID experience, I'll call it, the degree of mental health issues in young people and adolescents in particular, there's clear evidence that it is growing from, it was already fairly chunky. It's clear evidence that it's more pervasive. And maybe there will be need for very specialist people, but there will also be a great need for general training in these areas for all sorts of staff, particularly in primary care settings, which would deal with the vast majority. So I just think that this has ramifications specifically, and whether that's in this year or in future years, there will be ramifications. So Alex.
Thanks, Chair. And just on that last point, we actually had a really detailed paper on mental health at our executive team yesterday from Kerry. And as board members will be aware, we jointly with Social Care Wales and Welsh Government held a consultation during the autumn as the first stage of developing some of our more strategic work on mental health. And so Kerry is now in the last stages of finalising the output from that conference, the conference summary. So should be in a position to share that with board members in the next week or so. And that may be something which board members would like to discuss further at a development session. I've just put a note in the chat, sorry that the externals won't be able to see this, but it does talk about in that plan, CAMS is obviously one of our urgent priorities, so we're not waiting to develop the plan until we start to address some of the CAMS issues, but as Push has alluded to, there has been a lack of formal training to take mental health professionals to provide them with the right specialist training to go into CAMS. And so we are working with, I think it's Bangor University, to look at what they've been doing with BETC over a number of years, to look at how we roll that out and formalise some of that education and therefore make it more attractive to people, because there is an actual qualification that they can have, which gives them the equipment and the tools and the skills to really do that job properly. So there's quite a bit happening in that space, John, and the conference report will give you a summary of all of the current work as well as all of the proposed work as well. So it is something which I think you'll see a lot more of, hopefully over the next couple of months.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to make a point about the plan. I suppose for me, just seeing the plan develop over the last year, obviously we spent a lot of time last year on our strategic objectives because it was for a 3-year plan initially. And so it's right and proper that we haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater and started again, and we've built on what we had last year. But I think we have been able to use, again, the experience of running the organisation for the 2nd year to refine a lot of things, to make more sense of them and to make them more concrete. We're not quite there yet, we're still on a bit of a journey, but I think it has definitely improved clarity on what we're doing. It's improved clarity on where we need to work together within the organisation. And what we've also been doing is broadening out the number of people who are what we call senior responsible officers. So really the lead person for those objectives in delivering on them. And so I think from a development point of view and an OD point of view, that's got to be positive because we've got a broader range of people helping us to deliver those things now. So we have, I think, you know, for me, I have seen a shift in how sophisticated our plan is becoming. I think in terms of Jill's point around the alignment, yeah, it's last year it was a lot. It was kind of harder because we were new, but it was easier because people had more time. So we did a lot of that engagement on a face-to-face basis last year, and we're conscious this year that the health boards are finding it really difficult to do their plans this year because of the uncertainty about next year. We're in a better position than them, and it's almost, we just need to be sensitive about asking them to spend too much time on our plan because ours is clearer when, you know, they've obviously got their hands full with their own. So we will, as Nicola said, off the back of this draft, subject to board comments today, do some of that engagement. But I think because it hasn't changed significantly since where we were last year, I'm hoping that there is still that underpinning alignment. They will have the opportunity to comment. And what the bit that we've, I think, strengthened this year is the link with some of the national programmes. So Jill, we were having an offline conversation around the collaborative. And largely, you know, our work is where there are all Wales issues, and the collaborative programmes where there are some all Wales workforce issues. So if you think about cancer, mental health is another one in the collaborative, imaging, pathology. So over the course of the last couple of months, we've been trying to work more closely with the collaborative to say, well, actually, if there are workforce elements of those programmes, they should sit with us. I should be accountable for them. Yes, we need to work in an integrated way, but you know, we are the workforce organisation. We should be leading more clearly on those things. So I'm hoping as we see the plan develop, the fact that Nicola's been working really closely with Rosemary over the last month or so to try and tie those things together, we should see that alignment much more strongly in this plan. But I think the Social Care Wales is a really good point, and we do need to pick that up. And I'm sure that there's an opportunity for a conversation with them as we finalise this. Thanks.
Okay. Can I ask if there are any other people who want to make any comments or ask any questions? I can't see any more hands. So, Alex, I think it is important that we have an opportunity to reflect the Social Care Wales plan and our plan, and perhaps that's an opportunity to do a reflection on the workforce strategy and the annual plan and the two annual plans to see how they composite together. Is that doable?
I think generally, because they have a remit letter, they're in a slightly different cycle to us, but we can certainly try and do that. I mean, I think in previous years where we've tried to tie the planning cycles together, it hasn't quite worked, but I think we do need to at least sit around the table and look at all those three different ingredients.
One of the things I don't want us to lose is the fact that on the ground out there, there's a lot of transformation going on. There's a lot of change. And I think we need to be very careful and fleet of foot that we remain up to speed with the changes that are happening. And if there's going to be any action on social care, clearly that's a potential change, particularly if anything is done about parity of esteem. We've worked very well with sharing assets around well-being, mental health, but I think opportunity and equity of access to education and training across health and social care is core to our interests as well. Okay, so with that, I'm going to bring this discussion to an end. I think everybody is very welcoming of this document and recognises that there's comments from today, but I'm sure you would welcome comments and feedback on this draft annual plan through Nicola. And I'm asking that we support the development of the final version of the plan. And I think, Nicola, you should go back to your team and say, very well done. And thank you on behalf of the board. This is building on a strong start and is obviously maturing. And we look forward to seeing the final version. And you'll bring it back when to us?
We'll have a discussion about any further choices we need to make at the board development, and the final plan will come to the board in March for approval by the Commission to government.
It is a short time frame, so if there are any comments from board members, would you like to receive them within 7 days?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please.
Can I just put that marker down? If you've got any comments to make, can you feed them into Nicola by a week today? And then we look forward then to seeing the next iteration and our input in the February development session in preparation for the final version for the March board. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr. And now we go to agenda item 3.2, which is a report on simulation. Who's doing? Is this you, Angela?
It is, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. This is a report for noting. It's a brief report accompanied by the second paper, which is a presentation. The presentation, as board members will know, was delivered at a board development centre session previously, and was also delivered to a subgroup of the Education Committee. Simulation is an identified objective within our annual plan, both in this current year and going forward. It's absolutely critical at the moment to support both the delivery of education and training for those joining the profession and those already in the profession. We've appointed simulation deans that are leading on our simulation strategy. And this paper outlines in the presentation the work being achieved at pace to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Any comments or questions from board members, please? Is the presentation on our website?
I will check whether that is the case.
Because I like simple things, and this is very clear, very straightforward, and very informative. I think it would be worthy of going on the website, and then it can be updated.
Thank you.
Ruth.
Thank you.
It's a quick point, and to welcome the work, which has been, I think, at pace. It's been exceptional in a short period of time, and well done to those involved. I just wanted to ask about the issues around pace moving forward, and because we've got something which is a very new to many people concept, and yet we need to get it into routine practice and be accepted as a routine way of doing things really quickly. And the issues around that seem to me quite challenging. I just wondered if that's something that the people involved have been reflecting on.
Thank you, Ruth. Absolutely. One of the great advantages of the way we've taken forward the simulation posts is not one whole person, but 0.2 full-time equivalents of several people. So each of them has their own portfolio of work, which plays really to their particular strengths and area of interest. And that's brought forward in an overall strategy with a steering group that we work with them on a monthly basis. And what we're keen to balance is the pace at which we know this needs to go forward and with which they want to take that forward, whilst ensuring that the work that is done is sustainable and again spreads throughout Wales. So it is very much on our agenda. We've had 2 webinars since the associate deans came into post, and the one earlier this week looked at developing faculty to support simulation, because the intention of the simulation deans is not to take over, it is to support the development of simulation through existing and hoped for or planned for areas, so we achieve that sustainability and spread.
Thank you. Just
You're on mute.
Unmuted, Ruth.
Just to say thank you, and I think there'll be a clear role for comms as we move forward with this.
Very much so. Thank you.
Tina?
Thanks, Angela. I found the presentations immensely helpful, and I think there are some key issues that fit in with our overall plan here, because it enhances the multidisciplinary team approach to training, which is a real beneficiary of what we're actually about. The only thing I did ask at that presentation was whether or not there would be student feedback and evaluation of this process, and I just wondered if that has actually been now added to the agenda, so that we will be able to hear the experiences of students who participate in this and the value that they find.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to feedback that Sarah Cook, who is the lead associate dean for simulation, found the opportunity to give that presentation to wider audiences, and the feedback that was given hugely helpful in continuing to shape the strategy. So the short answer is yes, that is a key component of the work going forward. So thank you. Thank you for raising that, Tina.
Angela, given the velocity of change and the challenges for education and training, particularly in clinical settings that we faced during COVID, have we had a 5-year look forward? What would it look like in 5 years' time? What would good look like?
Certainly, and the annual plan that Nicola has just recently presented, we have simulation firmly as one of the objectives on our plan for this year, and that will be part of what we look at. One of the issues that we need to be mindful of is that when we take training out of the clinical environment into a simulated environment, that requires faculty and environments. And so we've got to look at what is, using this word again, the sustainable way forward for simulation. So we know it is the safe way forward, and all the evidence highlights the importance of simulation. So we need to give focused attention over the next year as to what good looks like over the forthcoming years, so we can maintain this momentum.
Yeah, I also think it's worthy of ensuring that we reflect the quality and the improved outcomes for not just the students, but for patients by using simulation. Like for instance, everybody clearly understands airline pilots going through regular simulation. I just think it's needs to be emphasized about how important the development of simulation is to improve quality.
Thank you very much. So, and as many board members will know, if we just focus on one profession at the moment, one obviously dear to my heart in terms of nursing and midwifery, there is currently a consultation out looking at how clinical placement hours and simulation hours need to work together in order to continue to develop sort of safe, confident, competent practitioners for the future. So,
okay.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions or comments? Can't see any. Thank you very much, Angela. We're asked to note the report of the interprofessional simulation strategy. And again, thank you to the team. Agenda item 3.3, I think this is you, Push, differential attainment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Like the simulation presentation, there was a presentation of the differential attainment status, if you like, at a board development session in December, delivered by Colette McAnally. So this paper is based on that presentation. I think what it's trying to do is to describe how we discovered differential attainment, what it means, how it impacts on our trainees. It was discovered in medicine, and how the GMC has taken this on board and intends to make sure that we are addressing some of the issues. So we're very pleased that we've instituted the Differential Attainment Board to deal with these issues that the GMC has raised, being mindful of the fact that this almost certainly occurs in areas outside medicine. So within HEIW, we have membership from all different directorates to make sure that they are learning the things that we're learning in medicine, in the medical field, to address those issues elsewhere. And as a result of that, we've got some really good input from the professional sport unit to educate people on a whole variety of ways on how to identify trainees at risk, how to support them, how to support trainees not progressing as expected, and have a strategy to make sure all our educators are cited on this. And one of the benefits of professionalizing the training program director roles is that differential attainment is part of their role and job description to address this. So the Differential Attainment Board has expanded to have membership from universities and from other stakeholders from outside HEIW, but there's a danger of it taking a mind of its own and spreading across all patches. So I've taken the opportunity to take this particular issue to the Race Equality Action Plan Steering Group, so that the things that we have discovered can be applied particularly in the education field and equality of access field, to other public bodies and to educational institutions. So that's where it's going through me, but this is what we're doing within HEIW as things stand. So so thank you.
Thank you, Push. Can I open up for any questions or comments on this paper? Alex?
I just wondered if Push was going to mention the award he's received.
Well, I wasn't, because I haven't actually been awarded yet. That's on Saturday.
I'm sorry, I thought it was last Saturday. Sorry. Okay, I jumped again. Okay.
But yeah, BAPIO have given me an award for services to medical education and research in Wales. So that's BAPIO Wales, British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. Thank you, Alex. I'm receiving it on behalf of HEIW, because it's not just me who's done this. It's, you know, without my teams, it would be impossible to be recognised. So thank you.
So, Push, one of the things I think we really need to do is keep abreast of, and you're in the heart of this, is keep abreast of the impacts that the pandemic has had on these issues, and it'll have a long wake. So yeah. I think we were facing an uphill task before. I think the energy we need to give this agenda and the determination we need to show needs to grow and be supported. And I'm sure the board would welcome any practical positive steps we can make to improve where we're coming from.
Yeah, there'll be more detailed paper even than this at Education Committee in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, so Ruth, I'm sure you will make sure the committee gives this a really good hearing.
Well, just to say how much I welcome this work, and so does the committee, as it has said previously. So look forward to that.
Okay, so for today, we're asked to note the approach taken by HEIW in addressing differential attainment. Thank you, Push.
Thank you.
And agenda item 3.4, primary care. Who is leading on this for us?
Me.
Thank you, Alex.
So yeah, thanks, Chair. So this is the third in the sort of trio of things that we had the opportunity to discuss at the December board meeting, but felt that we wanted to really make sure these things were in the public domain as kind of big strategic pieces of work that we're taking forward. And although this is still very much in its formative stages, we wanted to really sort of make sure there was a formal recognition of where we've got to on this work. Since we had the conversation in December, a couple of things have happened. So we have now finalised the sort of conference workshop outputs into a document that reflects the presentation really, but is perhaps more digestible to people who aren't here in the presentation. And so the next step is to provide all of the people who had the opportunity to either attend or could have attended the workshop back in October to comment on that as a stage one. Linked to that, Heidi made a really good point last time around engaging with GPs. And so Phil and Colette have been developing a plan to get a focus group together of GPs to support this as well, being conscious obviously of the fact that they're up to their eyes with additional work in terms of vaccination at the moment as well. But sensitively to make sure that we have got that focus group working, you know, as part of this programme of work now going forward, so we can test those ideas with people who understand it from a delivery perspective. We've also had a really great session with colleagues from NES in Scotland, who are a little bit ahead of this agenda, well, quite a lot ahead of us on this agenda actually, because they've actually got to the stage of having a model that they're going to be piloting in some parts of Scotland, And as you recall, that the whole focus of this is how do we put in place a sustainable framework to train the multi-professional team in primary care, and build on the good work that we've already got with the GP training practice model. And they've come up with a really innovative way of doing that, which we are now exploring internally to test out, how would that work in a Welsh context, but certainly, helps us with our thinking around what the model of delivery might be. And it was really useful to hear their discussion, and we're going to obviously keep in close contact with them, because I think they'd worked much more at it from an operational and delivery perspective than perhaps some of the discussions we've had with HEE, which were equally useful, but were more perhaps of a governance strategic nature. So that's been really good. And we're also looking to appoint a clinical lead to drive this work forward, again, to make sure that we're doing that engagement with all the different professions that we need to be involved in this, and to give us a bit of capacity to really make sure that we motor forward with this. So this is one of the pieces of work that we're kind of sensitive at the moment that the people we need to engage with have probably got other things on their minds. However, we do need to push forward with this in the background and make sure that we don't lose time on this, so that when people are ready to engage, we've got as much of this really sort of ready to go as possible. So yeah, another really exciting piece of work that we're really looking forward to accelerating in next year.
Thank you, Alex. Jill, you've got your hand up, then John.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you for updating us, Alex. It was a really interesting session at the Board Developments Day. One of the things that is still sort of, I suppose, challenging me in a way about this is the status of GPs and some of the staff in GP practices, and whether we've got, I think I asked before about the buy-in or our ability to influence or to command, I suppose, the ability to roll this out across the piece. Is that going to be a barrier, or have we got some method of making sure that all the staff are signed up to this?
I think with any change, that's obviously always something that's got to be considered, and that's why the engagement at the start is really important. And it's worth taking time at the start to do as much of that as possible before going headlong into a plan. So that's certainly our intention at the moment, is to get as many ideas as possible at this stage and do that engagement. I think in terms of levers and influences and opportunities, we have got levers through the fact that we operate the GP training practice model, and if we're trying to build on that and strengthen that and use that as a basis for future models, then obviously that is something which is available to us. We would obviously want this to be seen as something which is an opportunity, something that our colleagues in primary care have been asking for, not just in terms of practice staff, but in terms of that external professional team, so that it would give them people who've got those skills to start with, and that they're not having to do the retrofitting and the extra training of, and something that can show people through their training that primary care is such a worthwhile, valuable place to work in, and help with recruitment as well. So I think a lot of benefits generate from this, and that's why it's really important to keep going back to the case for change, which is that for a number of years, our colleagues in primary care have said it's not sustainable to keep doing what they're doing at the moment, do more, and not have a sustainable workforce that has got the right training and skills. And what we're trying to do is put the action behind the rhetoric, really, in terms of actual framework that we can roll out across Wales that isn't dependent on champions here and there through very good intentions and huge energy and drive doing bits and pieces of this, but we can say actually Wales is really serious about this, and we've got those foundations in place. So I would hope that with the right engagement, this will be seen as beneficial as long as it's done in the right way.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Heidi.
Thanks. I welcome it, Alex, and the focus group sounds fantastic. We do have regular meetings of the trainers networks and educational supervisor networks, and I think they might be more useful to tap into than perhaps cluster leads, who are definitely more from a management perspective rather than a training perspective. A couple of things, just sort of picking up on what Jill said. Certainly, we're looking at premises and sizes of premises and rooms. So having medical students in a GP practice is basically, we can't do it because they don't have sufficient rooms. So there's a premises issue, the self-employment status. So even if we get these assistance and help trained within general practice, who's actually going to pay them? Because GPs have to decide, you know, where the money goes, and there's no extra money for sort of employing more staff. And the current workload of GPs is such that actually training more staff, as well as the ones they're already training, is going to be difficult, especially when we have sort of measurements like can you answer the phone in 2 minutes, is it something we are measured against? So, you know, if we start making what's important measurable, then we might be able to actually help move the debate forward. One of the things that I think I wondered whether you'd thought about was actually a reciprocal arrangement with other primary care providers. So rather than thinking about necessarily bringing everybody into general practice, actually what can we move out of general practice that can be trained elsewhere? So for example, I've got medical students who I can't get ophthalmology training for because there's just not enough opportunities in the hospitals. But thinking outside the box, if they could get trained in Specsavers, or they could go in for their pharmacy training into a pharmacist, that would free up time and space within the actual practice for a reciprocal arrangement. So I think it's about thinking outside the box.
Thank you, Heidi. John?
Thanks, Chris. I very much welcome the report. I'm reminded, Chris, I think we've asked Charlotte to come along to both chairs and vice chairs in February to present this report, which I think will be really good in raising the profile. No, my question, Alex, is just a point about the locality training hubs. Are they going to be coterminous with LHBs, or are they going to be coterminous with the clusters? And I suppose it relates a bit to Heidi's point about accommodation and where we're going to actually physically locate them. How many of them are going to be?
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas that's up for discussion, John. I think in some areas, perhaps making it an LHB footprint might be sensible. In others, that's just not going to be the right thing to do because of the size and scale of the geography. I think in some places it may be more of a virtual thing than an actual physical thing as well, because certainly whilst there is going to be a need for teaching, a lot of the training is actually in practice or in the community. So I think all of those different elements are part of what we need to work through over the next couple of months, and really learn from some of the work that our Scottish colleagues have done on this, where they've used a network really of training practices and non-training practices to come together and provide, if you like, different ingredients for that training model. So yeah, I think those are some of the things which we need to be led by our colleagues locally on, not one size fits all and, you know, impose it from an all Wales perspective.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tina?
Thanks. Alex, I'm coming along the same lines as Heidi, really, in relation to looking at where and how it might be done. I just wondered whether or not there already has been a mapping of what the third sector organisations already do within the community and primary care sector, especially people like the RNIB and those agendas, where we might be able to tap into some of their already enhanced training programs that they actually fund, just to see where we are. And I guess the other thing is linking into the simulation training that we've just actually commented on, whether there is also some synergy between those two work streams coming together, and how they might come up with some ideas of how we might cut down the GP's need to involvement, but yet still have that either online or simulation training.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that simulation and digital agenda is going to be a critical part of how we deliver a component of this. So yeah, very much an interrelationship between those two work programmes going forward. The mapping, we haven't done that, Tina, but that's a really good point. And once we get some capacity into the programme, I think we'll be able to look at how we need to do all of these actions over the next couple of years and what's the priority, and make sure we've got clarity on all those different things, really. But at the moment, we're kind of, people are doing it on top of their other jobs, I suppose, to get this going. And so we haven't got that fully defined programme, but we'll certainly log that as an action. Thank you.
Ruth?
Just wondering how we're thinking about managing quality in this context. It just seems to me that it's going to be quite important to have a very clear framework at the outset, but we might need to evolve that as it moves forward. What work is going on in that context?
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons why we're doing it. In fact, Ruth, to make sure that there is that clarity on what the quality standards are. Again, I think learning from colleagues elsewhere that have done a bit more work on this, being really clear on what the competence frameworks are for staff we want to work in a primary care setting, and then being really clear from a HEIW perspective, what's our approach to quality management of that, learning from other things that we already do, like the GP training practice model, like some of our quality management in other education areas, and making sure we build the quality in at the start. And certainly we would see that's one of the main functions of HEIW, because we want this to be very much locally owned and locally delivered, but certainly have that sort of all-Wales approach to what the quality standards are, so that there's that consistency and everybody knows what good looks like across the board, really. So yeah, we would want to build that in from the start this time, not added on at the end. Yeah,
it would be really helpful at some point to see that brought together and what what we are actually planning to do, because it seems to me potentially quite challenging bridging the local through to our framework, but you're reassuring, so thank you.
Alex, just an observation. One of the biggest transformations in primary care has been a change in the amount of telephonic and video consultation. And of all the areas that is available for simulation and quality assurance, that is an area, and it also parallels in that it's an area that other clinicians in other environments need to acquire going forward, particularly in the area I'm interested in urgent care, where you have a multi-professional team who are actually responding to public to patient needs. So I think that the simulation agenda is really, really important. And I wondered amongst our simulation fellows where anyone has a particular interest or lead in the digital and telephone video type environment.
Certainly we have one of the simulation leads that is, Chair, interested in the digital agenda. I assume in North Wales that fits within his portfolio in answer to that question.
Okay, so I think we're in interesting times. So the board's asked to note the vision within the presentation, to establish a network of primary community care locality training hubs and the next steps in progressing this agenda. Are you going to bring this back to the board on a regular basis, Alex? Yeah. When can we have an update?
It depends really on people's ability to engage over the next couple of months. So early summer.
Early summer. So we'll look forward to seeing that on our forward work programme. Thank you very much. Okay, We're now going into part 4 of this meeting, which is around governance, performance and assurance. As well, Alex, I think the team that have been working on this need a pat on the back. Right? I think the use of Mentimeter and getting people's opinions and feedback during that session I attended was fantastic. But there's a lot of effort gone on by the team and Charlotte to pull this together. So well done to them. Eifion, ti'n barod?
Dwi'n barod, Chairman.
Right, yr arian, dyna ni te.
Right.
Here we are, Director of Finance Report, Eifion.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, diolch. If I can take colleagues very quickly through the finance report that's before us this morning. The finance report is for the period to the end of December, month 9. And as colleagues can see, the report presented an underspent position for HEIW at nearly £1.5 million at the end of month 9. This is an increase of nearly £250,000 on the reported position of month 8. And we can see that we're on track to be at the £2.5 million underspend that we flagged up at the end of month 6. If you remember, we did a deep dive exercise at the end of month 6 that identified that we would be have £7.5 million of resources that would be free by the end of the year. £5 million was returned after month 6, and we're on track for the remaining £2.5 million as we understand it at the end of month 9. We're undertaking a further deep dive at the end of this quarter, quarter 3, to actually confirm that position and to actually get a really detailed understanding of issues for the remaining part of the year. What I would take colleagues to is the paragraph on the top of page 4. Whilst that £1.5 million was brought about through all the same issues that I've been reporting for the months previously, there was one new item for month 9 in our reporting. We had information on the students that joined our programs at the summer. And the information that we had during December was the ones that had confirmed their position as being self-funders. That is, they didn't want to take up the bursary that was on offer within Wales. We received that information in time for us to do our month 9 reporting. And what colleagues can see in terms of what's included within the report is that the number of self-funders within our programs increased from our planning estimate of around 200 taking that option to 370 taking that option. So it's 170 more students who took the self-funding option. And that produced an underspend, a further underspend of about £1.5 million. Now, colleagues will know that we return this to Welsh Government because, in essence, well, the government, the UK government, has to actually finance these students through the loans mechanism rather than through our means of doing it through the bursary mechanism. So this £1.5 million isn't included in the reported £1.5 million position. We've actually put it below the line because we know with this information we will be returning it to Welsh Government before the end of the year. So in terms of our revenue position, we are on track to what we previously reported to the board. Turning quickly to capital expenditure, we have a capital programme that we anticipate being fully utilised by the end of the year. And I would inform colleagues that the additional sum of £46,000 that we carried over from last year for use by the pharmacy team has been returned to Welsh Government because the pharmacy team no longer required that funding to actually take the agenda forward. Balance sheet, the only thing that I would note in terms of the balance sheet section for colleagues is that our cash management is within the targeted position in terms of where we managed that to be. And the last item that I would raise for colleagues is our public sector payment performance. Is at the end of month 9, we were at 94.5%. Colleagues will know that the target is 95%. And from a bit of a slow start at the beginning of the year, we've recovered the position up to 94.5%, and we fully expect to be able to reach the 95% target before the end of the year. And in that, Chairman, I haven't got any more issues that I would raise out of that report to highlight to colleagues.
Diolch, Eifion. So I've got a hand up from Tina, Jill and Kerry. Tina?
Thanks very much, Ian, for that. One of the questions I wanted to raise in relation to what the finance actually shows is that you mentioned a potential 375 students being self-funded and taking their own loans. And I wonder what the knock-on effect, and it's something that we might need to look at, what is the knock-on effect of those 375 students not remaining in Wales, because the conditions around a bursary is that they would have to remain in Wales in an NHS employment capacity for up to 2 years. I'm just wondering whether we're now going to have a deficit of 375 coming out into our own workforce plans requirements in 3 years from where they started. And I just wondered whether or not we need to start looking at that in our planning going forward. It's been quite indicative to say that students who are self-funding and taking a UK student loan actually frees them up from remaining in Wales, and that does cause concern going forward. Thanks.
Yes, in terms of that number, clearly we would want students who take up options or opportunities of training within Wales, but who have no intention of staying within Wales after graduating. We would much prefer them to take the self-funding option rather than the bursary option, whereby we would then have to recover the bursary from them if they continue in terms of their intention of not working within Wales. So in essence, those who know at the beginning that that's not what they want to do, which is to stay in Wales, we'd rather them to actually take this view. But what I would say is we would need to analyse to actually understand these 370, because not all of them might be students from outside of Wales. Some of them could be students within Wales who have decided to take the option of being self-funded, to actually give them that choice. And we do actually see there are numbers of Welsh students who take the self-funding option. We can bring some further information on this number back to colleagues in a future meeting to actually analyse the 370 between those that are Welsh domiciled and those that are from outside of Wales. The last point I was getting to is, yes, you are right, that our intention would be that the programme numbers that we commission, that we would want all of those students to actually return, to progress, to actually work within Wales. And that is the key point of our commissioning programme. Again, we need to take this information back into our strategising and actually try to work through what does this mean for our future graduates coming into Wales. So that information I haven't got now in terms of its impact, but I would need to actually discuss that with colleagues and come back and brief colleagues. Probably we could do the discussion in our education meeting to actually discuss it further.
Okay. Thank you, Eifion. Jill?
Just a couple of points, if I may, Chair. Thanks, Eifion, for the report. Very clear. There are a couple of places where we talk about underspend in terms of whole-time equivalents, which looks just marginally odd in terms of the amounts. Now, I'm sure it's more nuanced than just the whole-time equivalents equaling that amount. But for the public reader, I guess, they may come to the conclusion that, for instance, 24.3k equals 2 vacancies, and it looks very, very low. So I think there's probably something about the nuancing about the underspend and what it relates to that we might want to just consider going forward if we could. The other area, I guess, that I just wanted to ask about is the payment policy, and it may be something that we have a discussion offline, Ivy, on, but we do seem to struggle to get our bills in on time. So we seem to have a lot that takes some time to get in and delay in payments. So I just wondered if we could pick that up perhaps as to the reasons why in a separate discussion.
Okay, we could pick that up in a separate discussion, Jill, but what I'm saying is we're actually paying nearly 95% of our bills within the target that was set.
Yes, sorry, it was the bills that come in. We seem to struggle to get our NHS bills in quickly. Sorry, Ivan.
Oh, right, it's the NHS part of it outside the NHP target, yes. And it is something that we chase our colleagues for it within the health boards, and they do come in probably quarterly, but yes, I could pick that up with Jill outside of this meeting if that's a better place for it.
Yes, thank you, Ivan. Kerry?
Yeah, just to take Jill's point further in terms of vacancies, we seem to be carrying vacancies for some time, and I was just wondering, you know, it's very difficult in the current climate to undertake recruitment, but what are the sort of plans to address this issue, please?
Okay, we are recruiting throughout this period in terms of, even though during the pandemic, probably the process is a bit more elongated than we would wish it to be, but there is a turnover, and there's a turnover of staff leaving, but there's also staff joining HEIW over this period. There is a team within Julie's section that actually monitors our vacancies and the recruitment plans that we have. And our information is that the post that we want to progress with, there are actions in place to actually recruit to those posts. There are some posts that during this period we haven't recruited to. I can think of 2 posts within my team that, because of the smaller number of events that we are organising and some of the other activities during the pandemic, the commercial events and so on, we have vacancies within the finance team because the activities associated with supporting that work isn't going on, and therefore we haven't recruited to those posts. So some of the vacancies, a small number, are in response to the situation we're in, and some of it is just that there is probably a more elongated process in recruiting to the vacancies, to the vacant posts that we have got. Julie, I don't know if you want to add to that comment.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, colleagues. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. So thank you for that. Just to reassure colleagues, we have had, I suppose, more normal turnover in the last 12 months than we've had since we were established. So we have seen some churn in some teams. Partly that's because people have got other promotion opportunities, and partly that's just the settling in period after changing from one sector to another. We have also included in some programmes and some projects we've taken on from Welsh Government, and some of those have come in with quite substantial vacancies in them. So it's kind of inflated our vacancies numbers. What I would say though is I had my directorate meeting last week, and even a directorate that's not an enormous one, we were able to welcome 11 new starters and most of those in the digital area. So so we are actually actively recruiting. We don't have a backlog at the moment, but I think it's just the time lag between us appointing people and then actually starting in post.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Alex, did you want to come in? No, okay. Right, everybody. Any more questions or comments for Eifion? Where the board is asked to note the financial position reported at month 9 and the underlying reasons for the key variances to the budget. You all content?
Yes.
Thank you. It's now 11:46. I'm going to suggest we have a 5-minute comfort break. And back here at 5 to 12, please. Okay?
Just check, 4 2A. Who's going to lead on that? Is Nicola going to introduce that report?
Yeah.
Recording has restarted.
Oh, so do you say someone's restarted?
Yeah, recording's restarted.
Okay, Nicola, so if you'd like to introduce your report.
Thank you, John. So this isn't the formal performance report to the board, which will now be coming in March for the Q3 performance report. This is a paper which is asking the board to approve the performance framework, which is attached, and that we discussed in detail at the board development session in December. And thank you all very much for your comments and input at that point. And the purpose of the framework is to make sure that we've got a good system in place to improve our performance and to communicate and understand how we do that. And very importantly, to allow the board to discharge its functions of assurance and scrutiny of the organisation's performance. And as you know, we had an internal audit report on our performance arrangements in March 2020, and there were also recommendations in the structured assessment report as well. And the approval of the performance framework means that we will have completed some of those recommendations. In addition to the performance framework, which hasn't changed apart from in minor ways in terms of correction of typos, etc., from the version that you saw in December. The data glossary for the existing dashboard is also attached, and in that, again, we've identified the executive leads and owners for the KPIs to make sure that that is really clear and that the data that's reported is validated appropriately. And again, that meets additional audit requirements. So the board is asked to approve the performance framework and note the data glossary and the audit recommendations that have been completed.
Thanks, Nicola.
Any questions? Thank you, John.
I note that Chris is back. Chris, we've just, Nicola's just introduced the new performance framework. If you're happy, I've got one comment. Shall I make my comment first?
Yes, please.
What I was going to say, Nicola, we've obviously had a lot of time to look through the framework. We've seen this in development sessions, and I'm very happy with what we've got now and happy to agree that we approve it. There's just one comment which I hadn't thought of before. You know, in the framework, we make individual managers responsible for their data. So an individual manager must make sure that the data that they're submitting into the report has integrity. Do you think we need a checking system or a random checking system just to make sure that our data are correct, you know, when they go into the framework, when they go into the report?
Thank you, John. Because we have changed the reporting schedule and we've now moved to the quarterly cycle, the report has more time to go through the peer review of elements of the data for the exec leads to check what has been reported, and it will go through the exec team as well to pick up any.
So there's at least 2 checking mechanisms anyway.
Yeah.
That answers my point, yeah. Thanks, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you, John. That was interesting. Right. Any questions or comments from board members? No. Nicola, I found this really comforting to see. It's pretty comprehensive, and clearly it's picked up on lots of messaging and work that's been going on over a number of months. So we're asked to approve the HEIW performance framework, to note the data glossary that has been developed to accompany the performance dashboard, to note that a number of the audit recommendations on performance management are complete. So can I ask your approval, please? Can you verbalize it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. Dafydd, risk appetite for approval. Diolch yn fawr.
Okay, diolch, Cadeirydd. I'll be presenting the next two papers in Welsh, so hopefully Jackie will be taking over and translating. Felly, Cadeirydd.
Oh. David, just a quick reminder for everybody to switch to the English channel if you want to hear the translation.
So can everybody switch to the English channel if you want to hear the translation? Diolch yn fawr.
David, stay in the off channel.
Okay, I'm in the off channel. Felly, diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Papur yw gymeradwyo ydy hon. Mae o'n ofynnol o dan polisi rheoli risg addysg a gwella iechyd Cymru, fod y bwrdd yn adolygu archwaith neu blas risg yn flynyddol. Ystyriwyd y papur yma yn y sesiwn datblygu'r bwrdd ac yn halwyd ym mis Rhagfyr. Cytunwyd yn y sesiwn honno i lynu at geiriad y datganiad archwaith risg ynghyd â'r asesiad o lefelau goddef garwch ynglyn â risg ac i wneud man newidiadau i'r ddogfen archwaith risg. Mae'r man newidiadau yn ymwneud ac ychwanegu diffiniad o oddef garwch risg ynghyd â cyfeirio at yr IMTP. Felly, gyfynir i aelodau i gymeradwyo'r ddogfen archwaith risg sydd ynghlwm yn atodiad 1 o'r adroddiad.
Dwi'n gorffen?
Do.
Diolch yn fawr. Can I confirm that all board members heard and understood the translation? Yes? Right, yes. Thank you.
That's good news.
David?
Well done, everybody.
David, we are asking members to approve HEIW's updated risk appetite, which includes amendments highlighted in the proposals, paragraph 3 section of the report. Are there any questions or issues to raise with David? I can't see any, so I'm asking you to approve. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. 4.4, David?
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Dyma papur i ystyried polisi arfaethedig AaGIC yn ymwneud â ymdrin a chwynion. Felly papur sy'n gofyn am gymeradwyaeth y bwrdd ydy hon i'r polisi. Mae o'n polisi sydd wedi baratoi'n bwrpasol ar gyfer AaGIC. Mae'r polisi arfaethedig yn adlewyrchu rôl AaGIC fel cyflenwr addysg ac hyfforddiant o fewn y gwasanaeth iechyd. Ni ystyriwyd fod polisi cwynion presennol y gwasanaeth iechyd, sef putting things right, yn berthnasol i ni, gan i fod yn canolbwyntio ar cwynion sydd yn ymwneud efo cleifion, ac wrth gwrs nid ydy AaGIC yn trin cleifion wyneb i wyneb. Mae'r broses o ddatblygu'r polisi wedi bod yn broses drylwyr. Ystyriwyd y polisi gan y Pwyllgor Archwilio ym mis Hydref, ac yna gan aelodau annibynnol y bwrdd yn mis Rhagfyr. Mae o hefyd wedi cael ei ystyried gan y tîm gweithredol a'r uwch dîm arweinyddiaeth. O ran cynnwys y polisi, yn gyntaf, mae'r polisi'n pwysleisio bod AaGIC, lle bod yn bosib, yn delio gyda pryderon a chwynion anffurfiol mor gyflym a sydd yn bosib, lle bod hynny'n briodol. Mae o hefyd yn amlinellu y trefn sydd ar gael ar gyfer delio gyda cwynion ffurfiol. Ac mae yna ddau gam o fewn y polisi, felly o ran y cam cyntaf, mae hwnna wedi i lunio i ddelio gyda cwynion ffurfiol syml, tra fod yr ail gam wedi lunio i delio gyda cwynion ffurfiol sydd yn fwy cymhleth ac angen cael ei ymchwilio yn fwy trylwyr, ac hefyd unrhyw cwyn ble mae'r unigolyn yn anfodlon gyda'r asesiad neu'r ymateb maen nhw wedi cael gan AaGIC o dan asesiad o dan cam 1. Gan fod hwn yn polisi newydd a phwrpasol, cynigir y bydd yn cael ei adolygu o fewn blwyddyn. Felly, i gadarnhau, dyn ni'n gofyn heddiw i'r bwrdd gymeradwyo y polisi trin cwynion. Hapus i gymryd cwestiwn yno. Felly, diolch Cadeirydd.
Diolch Dafydd. Nawr, ydy pawb wedi clywed a deall beth sydd wedi dweud? Has everybody understood and heard the translation? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I've got a hand up from Tina.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I do understand it, and I just wanted to say a huge thanks to David for taking the time to clarify some of the issues that I raised with him informally ahead of the board. So I'm really pleased to see that he's taken those on board. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina. Are there any other questions or comments for David? No. So as a board, I'm asking members to approve the complaints handling policy. Can I have your verbal approval?
Yes.
Please?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Rhif 4.5, review of standing orders. David?
Thank you, Chair. I'll turn to the English language for this one, as we may need to comment specifically on the standing orders. So the background to this is that the board is required to review its standing orders on an annual basis. And the paper before the board can be split into two main elements. The first element is in paragraph 2, and that in essence outlines the amendments that have been made to the standing orders during 2020. And we are just asking the board to note that element. That's a summary in chronological order. The second element, which is outlined in paragraph 3, which is the proposals section, relates to proposed amendments to the standing orders, and these are amendments that have been identified as a part of the annual review. So just to run through those amendments quickly, we're proposing that the deadline for the AGM reverts back to the 30th of September. It was moved to November as a part of the response to COVID. That we amend the scheme of delegations to reflect the fact that we now have got a director of planning, and will from next week onwards have a director of digital. So just to update the scheme of delegation to reflect those new roles, and that responsibilities have been allocated to those new roles. We need to just update and correct the title of the director of finance. And finally, we just need to update the delegated financial limits to reflect the fact that we now have the Director of Digital and Director of Planning, and to authorise that their spending limits are up to £50,000 relating to non-education and training contracts. So just to confirm, there's two elements to the report. One is to note the update with regards to the changes that we've already made to the standing orders throughout 2020, and secondly, to request that the board approves the recommendations that we've made to the standing orders as outlined in paragraph 3. Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any questions or comments for David? I can see no hands raised. Okay, so I'm asking the board to note the amendments made to the standing orders in 2020. Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm asking you to approve the further amendments to the standing orders in the revised version of the document attached as Appendix 1.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you very much. We now move on to 4.6. Thank you, David. And it's to receive key issue reports from the Audit and Assurance Committee held on the 18th of January 2021. Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. The report focuses obviously on the key issues raised at the Audit and Assurance Committee on the 18th of January. The committee was held remotely, as is the way at the moment. And just briefly, the business that we covered, we received and noted the information sharing agreement with the General Pharmacy Council, welcomed that, and very encouraging, and hope to see more of those. We received the report on counter fraud, which was encouraging, and pleased to see that there's been a wider and better focus, and thanks to Ivion for pursuing that, I think, within the organisation. Audit Wales gave us their annual report and an indicative audit plan, which will now go for moderation and come back in final form to the next Audit and Assurance Committee. Internal Audit gave us a progress report. They went through the PDPR internal audit report, and I think the committee noted that there was still some progress to be made on that, but clearly understood that there were other priorities ongoing at the moment. In terms of financial systems, the committee were reasonably content, but obviously wanted some progress on the IT inventory and the asset register, which has been commented on, and received an All Wales COVID report from Audit Wales. We noted good progress on cybersecurity, a really excellent plan, which I'll come to in a bit of detail in the closed session, but that was part of the information governance report. The annual review of standing orders, obviously we have just taken at the board, and they were thoroughly scrutinised at the Audit and Assurance Committee. And then finally, we considered the annual accounts plan. It's hard to believe that we're around to the next year of annual accounts. Procurement compliance, the corporate risk register, and the audit recommendations tracker. So that was all I wanted to bring back to the board, Chair. So you asked to note the content of the report for assurance.
Okay, any questions for Jill? Can't see any, Jill.
Excellent.
So I'm asking you therefore to note the content of the report for assurance.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we've, as Jill pointed out, we've already approved the amendments to the standing orders. So thank you, Jill. The paper 4.7 is the action is to note the report for information on in-committee decisions of the November board. Can I have your approval, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then finally, 5.1, we're asked to receive the approved minutes of the NHS Wales Collaborative Leadership Forum held on the 29th of July 2020. And I'm asking you to note the report for information. Can I ask you to note, please?
Yes.
Yes.
We're coming to the end of this meeting, and I'm about to announce that we'll be going into in-committee. However, it would be remiss of me not to point out that our minute taker today, par excellence, is Kay Barrow, and this will be Kay's last formal meeting of the board. She's leaving for pastures new, and I'm sure, Kay, we would all wish you success and happiness, and thank you for all the work you've done to support the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I've had no any other business. The board will have a board development session on the 25th of February, and it'll be held via teleconferencing. And the next full board will be on the 25th of March. And I suspect that that too will be via video conferencing. Can I thank those who joined the meeting from outside the organisation for attending, and hope that they found it informative. And with that, I resolve that we go into in committee. Can we please stop the recording? It's